They told her to stay back. The nurse with the limp wasn't supposed to be there. But when 4 Marine helicopters touched down on that hospital rooftop, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning at Cedar Grove Medical Center when Sarah Mitchell first heard the news. She was a trauma nurse, 28 years old, and she'd been walking with a limp for 6 months after a car accident left her with a partially healed leg injury. The doctors told her she'd recover fully, but it would take time. Her supervisors had been understanding, giving her lighter duties, keeping her away from the emergency response teams. But Sarah didn't become a nurse to stay on the sidelines. That morning started like any other. She arrived at 6 a.m., grabbed her coffee from the break room, and began her rounds on the 3rd floor. The hospital was quiet, the kind of peaceful that only exists in those early hours before the chaos of the day begins. She checked on her patients, updated charts, and tried not to think about the throbbing pain in her leg. At 7:15, everything changed. The hospital's emergency alert system crackled to life. A mass casualty event was incoming. Multiple critical injuries. Military personnel. ETA 15 minutes. All available trauma staff to report immediately. Sarah's heart raced. This was what she'd trained for. This was why she became a nurse. She started toward the emergency department, but her supervisor, Helen, caught her arm. "Sarah, you can't," Helen said firmly. "You are not cleared for emergency response." "Your leg." "My leg is fine," Sarah interrupted. "It's not about fine. It's about protocol. I can't let you risk further injury. We have other nurses." Sarah wanted to argue, but she saw the concern in Helen's eyes. Helen wasn't being cruel. She was trying to protect her. Reluctantly, Sarah nodded and stepped back. But she didn't go far. She positioned herself near the emergency department, close enough to see what was happening. Close enough to help if things got desperate. And as she watched the trauma teams assemble, as she saw the organized chaos of preparation, something felt different about this call. Then she heard it. The unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors. Not one. Not two. But multiple aircraft approaching fast. Sarah moved to the nearest window and looked up. Her breath caught in her throat. 4 Marine helicopters were descending toward the hospital's rooftop helipad. She'd seen medical evacuations before, but never like this. This was something bigger. The first helicopter touched down, and the emergency doors burst open. Marines in full combat gear emerged, carrying stretchers. Sarah could see the urgency in their movements, the controlled precision of men trained for the worst circumstances imaginable. The trauma teams rushed forward, and Sarah watched as the first casualties were brought in. Young Marines, some barely old enough to drink, with injuries that made her stomach turn. Blast wounds. Burns. Trauma that spoke of combat she couldn't imagine. One after another, the helicopters landed and departed. The emergency department flooded with casualties. Sarah watched the trauma teams work with incredible skill, but she could see they were getting overwhelmed. There were too many patients, too many critical injuries, not enough hands. She saw Helen directing traffic, calling for additional staff, her face tight with stress. Sarah knew that look. She'd seen it before during mass casualty drills. They were reaching their limit. Then the 4th helicopter landed. This one was different. As the doors opened, Sarah saw a senior Marine officer step out first. His uniform was pristine despite the chaos, his bearing unmistakable. Behind him, 4 more Marines carried a single stretcher with extraordinary care. The officer strode into the emergency department like he owned it, and in a voice that commanded instant attention, he spoke 2 words that would change Sarah's morning. Angel 6. The entire department seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. Sarah had heard the term before. Angel 6 wasn't just any call sign. It was reserved for the highest priority casualties, individuals whose survival could impact national security, whose identities were often classified. Helen rushed forward. "Sir, we are at capacity. We have 15 critical casualties already and I don't care about capacity," the officer said, his voice like steel. "This Marine gets your best trauma surgeon, your best nurses, your best everything. Right now." Sarah watched as they wheeled the stretcher past. She caught a glimpse of the patient, a young Marine, couldn't have been more than 25, with severe injuries to his chest and abdomen. His eyes were open, conscious but glassy with pain and shock. The trauma team swarmed, but Sarah could see the problem immediately. They were stretched too thin. The other casualties had already claimed most of their resources. Angel 6 was getting attention, but not the focused, undivided care such a critical case required. She watched Dr. Reynolds, their best trauma surgeon, trying to divide his attention between Angel 6 and 2 other critical patients. She saw nurses running between rooms, grabbing supplies, their movements efficient but harried. And she made a decision. Sarah pushed through the doors into the emergency department. Her leg screamed in protest, but she ignored it. She moved directly to the trauma bay where Angel 6 had been taken. Helen spotted her immediately. "Sarah, no. You can't be here. You need help," Sarah said simply. "Your leg can wait." "He can't." The Marine officer who would demanded Angel 6 stepped forward. He looked at Sarah, his eyes sharp and assessing. He glanced down at her obvious limp, then back up to her face. "Can you do the job?" he asked bluntly. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir." He studied her for one more second, then nodded once. "Then do it." Helen started to protest, but Dr. Reynolds cut her off. "I need hands, Helen. Good hands. Sarah's one of our best. Let her work." And just like that, Sarah was in. She moved to Angel 6's side, her training taking over. The pain in her leg faded to background noise as she focused entirely on the young Marine before her. His vitals were unstable. He was losing blood fast. They needed to move quickly. "I need 2 units of O-negative, stat," Dr. Reynolds called out. Sarah was already moving, her hands steady as she started a second 4 line. The Marine's eyes found hers, and she saw the fear there beneath the warrior's facade. "Stay with me," she said softly. "You are going to be okay. I've got you." He tried to speak, but she shook her head. "Don't talk. Save your strength. We are going to take care of you." For the next 2 hours, Sarah didn't think about her leg. She didn't think about protocols or restrictions or what she was supposed to be doing. She thought only about Angel 6, about keeping him alive, about giving him every chance to make it home. She worked alongside Dr. Reynolds, with a synchronization born of countless hours together in trauma situations. She anticipated his needs, managed medications, monitored vitals, and provided the kind of focused care that only comes from a nurse who truly understands her craft. Around them, the other trauma teams stabilized the remaining casualties. The chaos gradually organized itself into controlled medical intervention. But in their bay, With Angel 6, the battle for life continued with intensity. Dr. Reynolds worked methodically, repairing damage, stopping bleeding, fighting for every heartbeat. And Sarah was right there with him, her hands never shaking, her focus never wavering. At one point, the Marine officer who would brought Angel 6 stepped into the bay. He watched silently for a moment, then spoke quietly to Helen, who had been hovering near the entrance. "That nurse," he said. "The one with the limp. What's her name?" "Sarah Mitchell," Helen replied. "She should have stayed back," he observed. "Yes, sir. She should have. But she didn't." "No, sir. She didn't." The officer was quiet for a moment. "Good. That Marine on that table has saved more lives than you can imagine. He deserves someone who won't stay back when it matters." 3 hours after the helicopters first landed, Angel 6 was stable. Not out of danger, but stable. His vital signs had strengthened. The bleeding was controlled. He'd been given a fighting chance. Dr. Reynolds stepped back, exhaling deeply. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time since they'd started. "Your leg," he said. "How bad is it?" Sarah finally allowed herself to acknowledge the pain. It was considerable. She'd probably set her recovery back by weeks. But as she looked down at the young Marine they'd just saved, she found she didn't care. "It's fine," she said. The Marine officer approached. He extended his hand to Sarah. "Thank you, ma'am. Angel 6 is one of ours. One of the best. What you did today won't be forgotten." Sarah shook his hand. "I just did my job, sir." "No," he said firmly. "You did more than your job. When everyone else said you should stay back, you stepped forward. That's the kind of courage we recognize in the corps." 2 weeks later, Sarah received a letter. It was from Angel 6 himself, recovered enough to write. In it, he thanked her for not giving up on him, for being there when it mattered most. He told her that he remembered her voice, telling him to stay with her, that he was going to be okay. He said that voice had kept him fighting. The letter ended with a simple line: "Some people stay back when things get hard. Thank you for being someone who steps forward." Sarah kept that letter in her locker. On hard days, when her leg ached and she questioned her choices, she'd read it again. And she'd remember that sometimes, the most important thing you can do is refuse to stay back when you're needed most. Because that's what heroes do. They step forward, even when it hurts, especially when it matters.